The topic today is 10 tips for how to sell more by selling less. And just to kind of level set or set the framework for the angle that we're coming from here today, here's a definition that I'll use for the way that we're using the word sell with this webinar, right? So, because we mentioned we're going to help you to sell more by selling less. So what do we mean by selling? And in this context, we're kind of using a little bit of a negative version of the definition, which is to sell is to try to talk someone into buying something. I'm well aware that there's different ways to look at the word selling. Sometimes you sell something to someone and you didn't talk them into it, or it's a very amicable professional situation. But the angle that we're coming from is we want to decrease the negative aspects of selling, right? And so this is what we're using for that the definition or the label or the bow around the negative stuff, which is trying to push something on someone, trying to talk someone into buying something. And with that being the case, I want to share some assumptions that I have. You may agree with these, you may disagree, but some of these assumptions are kind of the foundation for the concepts that we teach here and the concepts that I'll show you here today. But I believe that it is fun buying stuff. I mean, of course, even sometimes you forget about the money you're spending. Whether it's you're buying something for your home or your life, or even a business purchase. I'm a business owner, and I've made some substantial business purchases. Put a big purchase on the company credit card or whatever, and it was fun. I was looking forward to the enjoyment of consuming that product. By that I mean, just like you consume a chocolate candy bar when you purchase a business service, you consume it in terms of, I might purchase something that helps me. Let me give you an example real time here. We're doing a webinar. I was recently testing and purchased a webinar tool, okay? And I do webinars all the time. That webinar tool is taking money out of my pocket, but it's fun. It's fun testing it out. It's fun looking forward to it. But you know what? It's not real fun being sold to. And if you can kind of think about it, have you ever, this picture here looks like a car salesman, but maybe you've been walking in a showroom of a car or in a retail store, and you're looking for something. You might even have questions, but the salesperson walks up to you and asks you if you need help, or they try to engage with you, and it's kind of annoying. And even knowing you're thinking about buying something, you just, that engagement doesn't really feel good. It's not fun. It's not all salespeople are bad, or sometimes it is helpful when someone answers your question from like a customer service standpoint. But when someone really tries to sell to you, and back to the way that we're using the word sell, when someone tries to talk you into something, that's not real fun. And the reason why I believe it's not fun and that it does not feel good is that it doesn't feel good when someone tries to talk you into something. Even if it makes sense for you to buy it, when they're talking you into it and trying to convince you, like sometimes I get these emails where someone really got real crafty in terms of trying to persuade me into clicking on their link in their email. I find that annoying. Maybe it's interesting what they offer, but the way that they're trying to trick me into going to their website, I think I find it annoying or doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good to be tricked in any way. Let me give you a real example of this. Sometimes when you travel, I was traveling overseas. I was in Asia a few months ago, right? And the countries I was in, the U.S. dollar is very strong, so things are at a fraction of the cost. And you would have, I'll give you an example. You would have cab drivers that would charge you, let's say, between $5 and $10 to go across the city, right? And in the U.S., that's a pretty reasonable taxi fare. But in that country, That is ridiculous. That's like the type of fare that they would charge you to go to the airport. If you think of, typically it's like a big fee to go to the airport and a small fee to, go a few blocks over. So even knowing that the amount that they're charging me, it's really didn't, I mean, I wouldn't care, about paying that because it's so little. It doesn't feel good to if that transaction takes place and I figure out that they're overcharging me. It doesn't feel good to be tricked. So when someone's trying to talk you into something and there's a possibility that they're maybe tricking you either on price, or maybe they're trying to take advantage of you, or maybe they're trying to sell you something you don't need. You picture going in a mall and I've had these cosmetic people. They'll try to pull you in and wash your hands with some exfoliating stuff, or whatever, and it's stuff that you might not need. Maybe it's good, but maybe you don't want to walk out of the mall buying something that you really didn't need. It doesn't feel good, is my point. So that, I think those are some of the reasons that when someone starts to try to sell to you, again, this is the trying to talk you into something. It doesn't feel good, and the buying goes from being fun to not so fun and not feeling good, and our guard begins to go up. So if you agree with any of that, then the more you look like a salesperson trying to sell something, the less fun it's going to be for the person you're engaging with, the more their guard is going to be. So I always try to operate with, try to sound as little like a salesperson as possible, which makes you sound as little like you're trying to talk someone into something or take advantage of somebody. That being the case, so now let's get in. The topic here today is 10 tips. So I'm going to go through 10 very practical things that you can do to sell more by selling less. And again, so when we talk, the selling is trying to talk someone into something, right? So these tips will help you to sell less by decreasing how pushy you are. So when you're selling and trying to talk people into stuff, you're typically people think of being a good salesperson as being persuasive or being manipulative, almost in like a good way. And the reality is that I personally believe a good salesperson doesn't have to be pushy. These tips will help you to decrease, again, how much you look like you are a salesperson trying to sell something. I don't think it's bad at all. I don't think that you have to manipulate the situation to hide the fact that you're a salesperson, but I think that there's a difference in appearing like a company representative. Maybe you're the owner of a company, or maybe you are in a sales role. That's nothing that you need to hide, but there's a difference between being a business person and a representative and a consultant that has a product or solution to offer versus a salesperson trying to sell something. So these tips will also decrease the amount of effort, time, and energy that you spend selling. Again, in this context, it's the effort, time, and energy that you spend trying to talk people into stuff. So certainly your hours per week might not go down with these tips, but the amount of hours and time and energy where you're out there and you're pushing stuff on people will decrease. And in reality, when you do these tips, selling should be easier. So let's just get right into it. The first tip is to use a sales takeaway. And a lot of these tips that I'm going to show you are actually the opposite of what a pushy salesperson does, what a salesperson trying to sell something does, right? So a pushy salesperson pushes their product. You need to buy this, you should buy this, you're going to love it, you need it, you want it, don't miss out, right? Well, a sales takeaway is the opposite of that. So a sales takeaway is to say something like, hey, I don't know if you're a good fit for this. I'm not sure if you all need what we provide. I'm not sure if you're the right person to speak with or not. Sounds like you guys are doing pretty good over there. Maybe we aren't the right fit for you. Maybe now's not the best time for you to look at this. So that is the opposite of pushing. And let me just say that there's certain times when you say these, when you do a takeaway. Like you don't, if someone's saying, asking you for a quote and they have the buying sign on, then you don't say, well, maybe this isn't the right fit for you, right? That's not the right time. But if someone's on the fence and they're hesitating, and you want to get you there's a strategic time of when to maybe do a takeaway, and basically you kind of want to do it when they're on the fence or in neutral position. You can also do a soft takeaway at the beginning or throughout cold calls. So when I do a cold call, I'll do some soft takeaways multiple times. I'll say my value proposition. We help inside sales managers to get their salespeople asking the right questions. I don't know if you guys need what we do, so I was just calling you with a question or two. Right there, I did a soft disqualify. I did it right after the value proposition. So it's kind of like a push and a pull. So there's a time and a place to do the takeaway, but this is the opposite of selling in this context. So this would be selling less. The more you kind of take away, and when you use this correctly, you will increase rapport because people will trust you more. You'll decrease people's guardedness. You'll better qualify the leads you're working on, so this will lead to you selling more. Again, it is an advanced sales tactic. One of the key things is knowing what it is and when to use it. Here's a link to a webinar. It's a 30-minute webinar that explains the tactic and how to use it and when. Tip 2 is to resist that internal desire to talk about your products and company. So back to what we see selling as. So selling is pushing your product, right? Well, let me back up. The motivated salesperson is motivated to close their sales. They want to make money. They want to hit their targets. They're being pushed by management to sell, right? So if that's the direction that your mindset is, then what's the natural instinct to do? You need to sell your product, so go out there and talk about your product, right? I mean, it's counterintuitive to think, okay, I need to sell, so the last thing I should talk about, I need to sell my product, so the last thing I should talk about is my product. That's counterintuitive. But let me just show you this. So I think that the traditional salesperson, in fact, I think the majority of salespeople out there still today, not when I say traditional, it's not like years past, but even salespeople that email me and call me, this is their sales pitch. Hey, I'm with this company. This is what we sell. This is how it works. And this is how much it costs. And every communication is trying to close the sale. So just to give you an example, and I've used this example before, but someone calls me up. This is a real example. So someone called me up, a young lady from a payroll outsourcing company. So I outsource my payroll. Every company has payroll. She calls me up. Hey, I'm with this company. In fact, I used to use their company, so I switched over, and now she's calling me up. And this is what we do. We have these pricing packages. Are you looking to switch providers, right? So her message is trying to close the sale. Now, it's not a one-call close if I were to switch back. It would be multiple conversations. But her question of, are you looking to switch, right? That is a question that is aligned with the goal of closing the sale, validating, do you need this? Are you looking to do something today? So that is what I want you to resist. And that's your natural instinct. And that's the easiest pitch you have available, because you have all this knowledge in your head about, you know where you work, you know what you sell, you know all these details. So you can spit all this stuff out without a script or without a lot of thought, right? So it's real easy. But I think that that's not the most optimum approach. So what we do is and I'm going to show you the right side here, and we're going to keep going back to what I have here on the right side, so you don't have to digest all this real quick, but just to outline what it is, our approach is kind of the opposite of that. So instead of really being all about you and your company, your product, we want your message and your pitch to focus on the improvements you can make, the problems and pain points you solve, asking good questions, sharing some examples of how you've helped others, some use cases. If you differ in some sort of way, highlight that. If you deliver some sort of ROI, highlight that. And instead of trying to close the sale, which is, are you looking to make a change today, start a conversation. So she said, are you looking to make a change today? I wasn't, so there was really nowhere to go from there. Well, I'm going to need payroll processing as long as my company's in existence, so why not just start the conversation? And whatever she used to say that, I'm going to be in your area. You used to do business with us. You switched. I want to talk to you. You might not switch back. You might not make a change in the next year. I want to open the dialogue between our two companies again, and all I'm looking for is 10 or 15 minutes. So that is a message and a pitch that's more aligned with starting the conversation instead of, are you looking to switch providers? So that's what we would call a consultative approach. That approach on the right is less selling. Again, the way that we see selling is trying to talk someone into something. The left side is trying to talk someone into something. The right side is not trying to talk someone into something. So if you can shift from the left to the right, then you will sell less. And in my opinion, you'll sell more. Here is a webinar on that consultative approach that kind of goes through the right side there of all those different points. Tip 3 is talk about how you can help. So if I go back to this, like I said, I'm going to keep going back to the slide and talk about like individual pieces, but talk about how you help. So instead of, well, let me back up. So if I say don't talk about your company and your product, your first thought might be, well, what the heck am I going to talk about then? You want me to talk about sports and the Super Bowl or the weather? So the answer is well, instead of talking about your products, you could talk about the improvements you make. So like when I talk to prospects, we have a whole software platform that does all this different stuff at SalesScripter. I might talk to a prospect and they have no idea that we provide a platform, because I'm talking to them about getting people trained and shortening ramp up time and decreasing sales staff turnover and all this stuff, and not even talking about it that I will do it for them, but talking about it in terms of customer examples. So sometimes when people say, well, what do you do? Share an example of how you've helped someone else. So that's a good way to explain what you do. But anyways, that's what you can focus on instead of talking about your product. And again, the topic here is of this webinar is selling less. So if you're not pushing your products, if instead you're talking about how you help people, then you're not being a pushy product pushing salesperson, so you're selling less. Here's a webinar on how to identify the value that you offer, and here's a different webinar on how to figure out the pain points that you solve. Tip 4 is make it more about the prospect than about you. And again, I'm keep going back to these tips. There's a million tips that we could talk to you about, but these tips are very focused on selling less, right? And so when the salesperson's trying hard to sell, typically they're talking about themselves. And you could even think about it similar to like a relationship or dating, where two people are dating and one person is trying to make the other person interested in them, right? So they might talk about all their achievements. They might talk about all the great things about them. They might brag, right? They think that I'm saying all these great things about myself, and these things I'm saying are going to make the other person interested in me. And that's short-sighted. It's a logical way to go, right? And honestly, that's probably the way that a lot of people go when they're dating and getting to know people, and that's the way that a lot of the natural instincts of salespeople is. I want to make this person interested in my product and buy my product, so I'm going to talk about my product. But the reality is that it's actually short-sighted, right? So when you're dating, one thing that you can do to make someone more comfortable and engaged in your conversation, and instead of pushing them away, which you kind of push them away when you only talk about yourself, to make them more engaged is to learn about them. Ask them questions about them, and that gets them talking, and it helps you to learn about them, and you can do all sorts of stuff. You can build on that information that you know about them to ask deeper questions and learn more. You can basically make emotional deposits in a bank account with them, where since you're listening and paying attention to them, they feel good, and you're building a strong relationship. And the same thing applies with selling, in that instead of you talking about your product and selling, talk about the prospect. And the best way to talk about the prospect is to ask them questions. So we, for many reasons, that's part of the explanation why we believe that the best salesperson is the one that asks the best questions. But specific to the topic here today, one easy way to sell less is to ask more questions. Because when you're talking about you're selling. When you ask a question and the prospect is answering your question, technically you're still selling, right? But you're not being the negative seller where you're trying to convince someone. So again, getting back to this slide, this methodology, what you may say, okay, that's great. Yeah, I don't ask enough questions, or yeah, that makes sense, but I don't know what questions to ask. Well, this methodology does lead you to one set of questions, which are, if you identify the pain points that you fix, that list of pain points can be used to create a good list of short questions to ask that are good when you're really talking to a prospect for the first time on a cold call at a networking event. And so each question, there can be a question or two for each pain point. So something to check out there. Here's a whole webinar on asking good questions. Tip 5 is to don't sell the product, sell the conversation. We've kind of touched on this a little bit, which is most salespeople are on the left are always trying to sell the product, right? And I can go back to the payroll representative. Are you looking to switch providers, right? So that's selling the product, right? And I already explained to you that didn't go anywhere because I'm not looking to switch. And I get contacted all the time by people selling stuff that we buy, but their message is about selling the product. So if they don't contact us at the exact time that we're looking to buy, then if they're selling the product, that message isn't going to go anywhere. Let me give you an example. Think of like a household item that you buy regularly or you buy periodically. I don't know. I'm just thinking out of the blue here, but think of like toilet paper, right? You go to the grocery store every week, but do you buy toilet paper every week? And maybe this is a little crude of an example, but I'm sorry, it's just at the front of my mind for some reason. But because it's not something that you buy every week. Typically, a household buys bulk toilet paper, right? And so think about it that you will always need toilet paper, and if you run out of toilet paper, it is an emergency to get more toilet paper. So you're a believer in toilet paper. But what if someone called you up and said, hey, are you looking to buy toilet paper? If they did not time it right to where your supply is running low, then that message probably is gonna not go anywhere, right? Now, so my point there is that if you're selling the product, there's multiple reasons to not sell the product. If only tied to the theme of this webinar, selling the product is negative in the sense that you're pushing the product, right? Whereas it's a lot softer and you're not selling as much when you try to sell the conversation. Going back to the toilet paper, we all need toilet paper. So, and there's certain things you might like and dislike about toilet paper, and there's a price and how long it takes you to purchase it and the amount that you. So anyways, there's things to talk about there. So a toilet paper salesperson could sell the conversation on you. And hey, I know you buy toilet paper regularly. Odds are you don't need it right now, but you're going to need it at some point. And so I want you to know how we fit in with that. So can I talk to you for, of course someone doesn't sell toilet paper and someone wouldn't schedule an appointment for toilet paper, but you can convert this to your product, which is to say that salesperson might say, can I schedule a 5-minute conversation with you? I want to learn a little bit more about what you guys like and dislike, and just share a little information about us. That way when your supply of toilet paper runs out, you can know who we are, and you can keep us in mind. Or you might determine that we aren't the right people for you, and then you can know that you're purchasing the right product. Anyways, so sell the product, and that, I'm sorry, don't sell the product, sell the conversation. And so this is kind of how that would look like. Typically, if you're selling the product, you're skipping ahead in the sales process. So when you're first talking to someone, whether it's a cold call or you meet them at a networking event or an email, the next step is not for them to purchase from you. The next step is to have a real conversation, and that could be a 10-minute phone conversation, popping by their office. If you're cold calling them, it could be a conversation right there at the same time. You might close them to say, I have some more questions to ask you, but it's going to be about a 5 to 10 minute conversation. Are you okay to have that right now? You've just closed them for the conversation, and you have that at the same time. But anyways, there's a lot more there towards managing the sales process. But my point is that when you shift to selling the conversation instead of selling the product, you will be selling less. In my opinion, you'll end up selling more because you don't have to worry about timing it perfectly right. And getting to this next tip is selling the conversation instead of selling the product makes it easier to overcome objections. And let me pause that thought, and I'll come back to it, because objections, we get these should look familiar to you. You know, what is this in regards to? I'm not interested. Just send me your info. We already use someone. We can't make changes. We don't have any budget. So those are objections you're going to run into, right? So again, the theme here is selling less, right? So when someone's really selling hard, when they get I'm not interested, their approach and instinct is going to be to try to make that person interested. When they get the response of can't make changes right now, their instinct is to try to talk that person into why they should make a change. So that's selling hard. What we want to do is we want you to sell less, right? So again, basically the left. Let me go back here. The left side is selling hard, right? And so to sell hard when you receive those objections is to respond with something from the left. So when someone says I'm not interested, an example is you talk more about your product. We're not really interested. Oh, but did I tell you that we have a 24/7 support at no cost? So that's talking about your product to continue to try to make that person interested, and they're not interested. So you're trying to overcome the objection. So with our approach, you can still sell less even when you get objections. So our approach is to basically not necessarily resolve the objection or overcome it. Sometimes you do need to deal with an objection head on. Like for example, if you're later in the sales process, if there's a deal breaker, game stopper, you need to get it on the table, right? Because you need to protect your time. But if your goal is to get the conversations and just open the dialogue between the two companies, you don't necessarily need to deal with objections head on. You need to kind of sometimes get around them and just keep conversations going. And so most of this stuff on that right side can be used to keep conversations going. And to tie to the webinar here, the stuff on the right can be used to sell less and could lead to you getting around objections more. And by getting around objections, you can sell more. You can create more, generate more leads, keep conversations going, and help you to sell more. Let me give you an example. So a gatekeeper's most common objection will be, what's this in regards to? If you answer that in any way about the company that you're with, the product you sell, that you want to schedule an appointment, blah, 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 they'll know that it's okay to get rid of you. So I reply with the first line here, which is the value. Reply with your value proposition. So that's a response that you can say to that. When someone says I'm not interested, you can reply with some of your pre-qualifying questions. Oh, I understand. If I could ask you, are you currently using this? So keep the conversation going. You can even include language in your objection responses that show that you're selling less. So someone says I'm not interested, you can say this. You could say, hey, I understand, and you know what, Mark, honestly, I'm just calling you here. I don't even know if you're a good fit. So I'm not calling you trying to talk you into what we do. More so, I'm just trying to open the dialogue between our two companies. you're a director of inside sales. I work with inside sales directors. I typically, help them to improve their sales staff. So I just want to open the dialogue with our two companies. If I could ask you real quick, how long on average does it take for you to get a brand new inside sales rep trained up? And so what I just did there was, one is I redirected to one of my pre-qualifying questions. So that hopefully can get away from I'm not interested. So I'm not trying to make him interested. I'm just trying to keep the call going. And also I added some language in there to even let him know that I'm not selling hard. I'm selling less, right? So here's a whole webinar on objection handling. And number 8 is don't try to sell to everybody. So again, we're trying to get you away from selling hard, and we, in the context of this webinar, selling is trying to talk people into buying from you, right? So the reality is that when you start to look at, and by the way, when I say don't try to sell to everybody, I know that you're not out there like at the gas station filling up your car and someone pulls in next to you and you try to sell to that person. I know that you're not doing that, right? And that's not what I mean by don't try to sell to everybody. But if you do think of the group of potential suspects and prospects, right? I do think that it can be easy for salespeople that have these goals of selling, sales quotas, the need for commissions, all this pressure and desire to sell, right? And any suspect or prospect you could come in contact with, you could end up trying to sell to. Let me give you an example. When I was in one of my sort of like mid-career sales jobs, it was one of my first like outside sales jobs. I worked from home and whatnot. And whether it was the way the management was managing us or whatever, I mean, I definitely could have used some more sales training at this point. But there was a clear objective to get appointments. And there really wasn't an interest of whether the appointments were qualified or not. And where I'm going with this story is I recall driving like 3 hours. Where I'm based in Houston, Texas. I drove into Louisiana. It was a 3-hour drive, I think, for one appointment. Just because I had the motivation to get an appointment on my calendar, to make my manager happy and to look productive, but the meeting was not qualified at all. I didn't even try to really pre-qualify it. I just wanted the meeting, right? So that's an example of trying to sell to anybody or everybody. Anybody that will take a meeting with you or any prospect that you end up on the phone with. And that's selling hard, right? We want you to sell less. And so the reality is if you look at this graphic here, if that pie is kind of everybody, not everybody in the world, but everybody that could be a prospect or suspect for you, the smaller piece is the people that may, and here I'm saying they may need it, they may want it, they could possibly buy it. The gray is don't need it, can't use it, won't buy it, and not available to buy it. And an example of the gray might be, let's say that you sell baby strollers, right? So the gray is people, someone that's not even married, a couple that cannot have children for whatever reason. Those are people who are in the gray, and they can never buy from you because they're just not even qualified. So I know that's like an obvious, like, oh, I would never try to sell to them. But when you're selling business to business, you could end up on the phone or engage in an email or something with someone that is in the gray, and you haven't asked the question or not to determine are they in the gray, and you end up going on an appointment with them, and that's selling hard. And yes, you might have meetings on your calendar and you look busy. But if you spend your valuable time going on an appointment with someone that's in the gray, then you're wasting your valuable time. So in theory, I know that sometimes managers manage by meetings, right? So you might meet your objective of having meetings, and sometimes you got to do what you got to do. But the reality is to have less meetings than more, if you're removing meetings that were in the gray, should lead to you selling more. if you use that time wisely. If you use the time, like for example, if instead of driving to Louisiana for 6 hours, when you think about there and back, more than that with the you add in the meeting and whatnot, there's a whole day wasted. When you add it all up, what could I have done from a prospecting standpoint, lead generation standpoint with that time? So it's something to think about. But just to kind of add more color, literally to this slide. If we kind of simplify those labels there, the gray is the prospect doesn't fit, so it doesn't make sense to meet with them. The red is we're not saying they do fit, maybe there's a fit, right? And so we can slice up the red to say, okay, well then a small sliver of the red is that there is a fit, okay? And then we can even go further to say there's a small sliver of the blue to say that it fits now. And to kind of explain these different colors to you using the baby stroller example, so the gray is a couple that cannot have kids, or there is no couple, it's a single. The red is that they are a couple and they're thinking about having a kid, right? Now the blue is that they're pregnant. Okay, so there is a fit. These people are going to need a stroller for their kid. But does someone go out and buy a stroller in month 1 or 2 or 3, whatever, early in the pregnancy? No, they don't, because they have other stuff they're worrying about, and there's multiple reasons, right? So the blue is maybe they're early in the pregnancy. They could buy it, but odds are it's just that it's a fit, but not yet. And then the green is the time is right. It fits now, right? So when you understand this dynamic, you can figure out where the prospects or suspects fit, and you can make decisions of how much time to invest with them properly. So that can help. The way that ties to our theme today is you can sell less, because without realizing where your prospect fits, you end up selling to everybody. And that's selling hard. You go on meetings that you shouldn't go on. And the best way to figure out where your prospect fits is asking questions, right? So it's all about the questions. I mean, when did you purchase the system you currently use, right? That's a good question to ask, because let's say you sell cars. So people don't buy. If someone bought a car in the past year, in most cases, the odds of them buying another car right now are extremely low. So even knowing someone might love the model of car that you sell, and they might show you all this interest, a great question is, well, how old is the car you're currently driving? And if it's a year or less, you know that they're probably not even, they're in the gray, of that chart. So you need to give them your info. You need to stay in touch with them, but you don't want to spend, if you're a car salesperson, 2 hours test driving your cars on a Saturday afternoon with the person that has a year on a car that's a year less. Moving on. Be a giver instead of a taker. So a taker is the product pusher, right? The product pusher, the hard seller, is trying to sell their product, and they're trying to sell their product. They're literally trying to take your money. I mean, that sounds extremely negative, more negative than I've already made the concept of selling. But you think about it, they really are taking your money. Your money is transferring from you to them, or from the buyer to the seller. But that is their mindset, right? They want to make commissions, they want to close sales, and they're wanting to sell to you. So for this tip, let's picture you're at a networking event. And whether or not that applies to how you generate leads or not, picture talking to someone at a networking event. And let's use the example of payroll services. So you sell payroll services, and you're talking to someone at a networking event. You know that the person that you're talking to, that their company, either that they're a manager at or that they own, has a payroll, right? They have employees, so you know that they could need what you have, But anyways, to be a taker is you want to sign up people to your payroll service and you want to sell payroll services, right? So to be a taker, you want to talk to this person about the really the left side of that chart that I showed you, which was you want to talk to them about your product. You want to sign them up, right? Now, to be a giver is more in line with the right, which is listening to them, asking questions, maybe talking about how you helped. But let's apply this to actually. Let's just stay with me here. So we're at a networking event. We're talking to someone. Instead of trying to talk about you and be a taker, try to lead with being a giver. And an example of that could be look for a way that you could help them. Right? The way that they could help you is to give you a meeting and ask for a quote and purchase from you. You would love that. But just put that on the side. Resist that instinct to be a taker, which it's understandable if you feel that, if your instinct is there and your thoughts are there, and try to look first to help them. So an example, and this is something that I do if I'm networking, even knowing I know I might want to try to sell to this person or they could be a prospect for me, as I'm talking to them, I'm thinking about someone I could introduce them to. I mean, you're at a networking event. So let's say that they are in a certain industry or they're telling me a story about something. In my head, I'm thinking about someone I could introduce them to, right? So, and then as soon as I think about someone, I'm like, hey, you know what? You should talk to so-and-so, and they probably would be a great resource to give you some tips on that. And that is being a giver. So I'm contributing to this person's life. And not only is that good in a lot of ways, tying to the theme here, that is selling less, right? To sell more would be, what are you guys doing for payroll? Is your payroll working well? That's selling hard. To sell less would be to talk about to try to help them out. So I always try to make an introduction, and there are people that I've introduced to other people in the past, and if that introduction has a positive impact on that person's life, they'll never forget you. They'll never, you'll really make a big deposit in that emotional bank account. So other ways that you can help people are provide a tip, provide ideas, provide feedback. So again, if you're at that networking event, someone talks about something, you could, again, instead of talking about payroll, which is what you sell, talk about, oh, hey, have you ever tried this, or you might want to think about that or whatnot. Applying this to what we're doing here today, right? This tip is me being a giver to you. If you're attending this webinar live, if you're watching this webinar on YouTube, if you've watched any of our other webinars, this is all about me being a giver. Do I want more customers? Yes. That is what I think about every single day. Am I focused here on helping and giving? That's all I'm thinking about right now. That's all that I was thinking about when I was creating these slides, is being a giver. Does being a giver and helping with this type of stuff lead to me getting customers? Absolutely. And that is a great example of right now I'm not selling, so I'm selling less, and this effort leads to sales. So I mean, you could debate whether or not instead of doing stuff like this, you could be selling hard, and you could argue or debate or maybe do some analysis as to which equals more. But that's what I'm trying to convey here with this tip. So the last tip is to broadcast your message, and kind of a way to think about this is that all of those. So if you do provide tips, and I know, like, if you think about talking to someone at a networking event and giving a tip or giving an introduction, that sounds kind of like a onesie twosie case by case tip, right? But for the product that you sell, you could possibly have a lot of tips. For example, and maybe you don't with your product or your industry, but maybe you do. And maybe you're not in a role, maybe you're an inside salesperson, so this doesn't apply to you. But so only use this tip if it can help you. But where I'm going with this is to broadcast your message, and your message could be tips and information and stuff that you give. And getting back just to use my stuff as an example, so like we help with sales and cold calling and prospecting. So there's plenty of tips that we can organize, and which is what I've done here today. And so those can be broadcast out, right? So you can be a giver and broadcast your message of help and tips through blog posts, through videos, through vlogs. This webinar will be recorded and posted on YouTube, and so then that video will be embedded and posted on a blog post. So that is us broadcasting our tips and the way that we give. And you can do ebooks, webinars. You could do all of that content that you create. You could expand to email drip campaigns. The way that this applies to what we're talking about here today is sell more by selling less. So if you become a giver, either more of a giver or a giver instead of a taker or whatever, if you become a giver at all, you can broadcast that and automate a lot of that and scale that, which is actually a big thing, scaling that. So instead of like networking where you're talking to one person at a time, or cold calling where you're calling one person at a time, when you broadcast, you can communicate to a lot of people at once, either through your website or through webinars or whatever, email marketing, and so that can allow you to scale. Now, this last tip, like I said, it might apply to senior managers or business owners, but this tip is very much in line with selling more by selling less, because what you have here is not selling. This is helping, right? And it's this type of helping and scaling that through broadcasting that leads to selling more. And you might say, well, okay, that makes sense. I should start a blog, right? Well, but what are you going to blog about? Well, everything on the right is good blog stuff, good video stuff, good webinar stuff. The stuff on the left is horrible blog stuff. I mean, sometimes people write blog posts about their products, right? People are not going to find value or like or whatever blog posts where you're just in there talking about your product. It's like going on a date with someone who just talks about themselves, right? It's boring. It's about you. It's about the other person. So when you think about the benefits you offer, the pain points, all of this stuff on the right, can be turned into content. To give you an example, the benefits. So let me give you an example so you can see how that works. But like benefits. So my product can help people, inside sales managers, to decrease sales staff turnover. Okay, so I know that that's a benefit that I provide. Now I can turn that point right there into a blog post. Three challenges with that decreasing sales staff turnover, or 3 improvements that you can make when you decrease sales staff turnover, or 3 tips to decrease sales staff turnover. I can turn that point into a webinar, which, by the way, I do have a webinar, how to decrease sales staff turnover. So I can turn that webinar into a blog. I can put that webinar on a blog post. I can turn that into an ebook. So, and that's just looking at one benefit. You also have a whole set of pain points. You have customer examples. That could be a case study. A customer example could be a case study. How company XYZ decreased sales staff turnover and improved sales at the same time by 47%. You know, that's an interesting story that my target audience might find interesting and that I can broadcast out. So that's just another example, again, tying back to what we're here to talk about. Everything I just shared with you is not selling hard. That's selling less, right? You're providing value, you're giving, you're broadcasting, you're communicating in a very passive way. Some of that might be that content will help to could help to drive traffic to your website. So we get a lot of traffic through search engines to our website. That's not selling hard. If someone goes to Google, types in a keyword related to your business, and ends up at your site, that's not you selling hard, you know. And so that's you being connected with prospects that are ready to buy or looking for what you sell. So not only is that you not trying to talk someone into something, that also decreases the odds of you spending time with, if you go back to the tip of not selling to everybody, and there's the big gray 3/4 of the pie. So bringing people into you, the people in the gray part of the pie that don't fit, they're not getting funneled to you by search engines and by email marketing and going to be coming in. You could label a lot of this as inbound. So but anyways, just something to wrap up there. These are the 10 tips, and just kind of will try to put a bow around this and then maybe open it up for any questions. But if you I'd like to make a deal with you. We produce a lot of, we give you a lot. If you haven't watched, if this is the first video you've watched or webinar you've attended, there's a lot of these. So we give away a lot. And if you want to return the favor to us, my deal that I'd like to make with you, if there was one tip that you found helpful in this webinar, one nugget that you think that you can take with you and apply, then for one, I think that's a good return on investment for your time here. And two, if you want to return the favor of exchange for that nugget, you can easily do that by liking, commenting, or sharing, or subscribing to this video, subscribing to the channel on YouTube, which is where this will be posted if you're watching the recording. So that's an easy way for you to return some love to us. Other than that, all of these tips is part of a more formal structure offering that we have called the Smart Sales System. So I showed you 10 tips today, but like I said, there's a lot more tips that we have, and they all kind of fit together into a system. So it's a system that you can actually implement for yourself. If you're a manager, you can implement it for a team. But we call it the SMART system, Smart Sales System. So SMART stands for basically sales messaging and response tactics. So if you didn't figure it out, a lot of what we were talking about here today is how you communicate. So it's not just about making 100 dials per day. It's about what you're saying, and it's not how hard you're selling or how much you're trying to talk people into stuff or how persuasive you are. It's about, in my opinion, it's about what you're not saying. About how effective are you at not triggering someone's guardedness and not making someone feel like you're taking advantage of them or talking them into something. So this is a sales system because it's something that you can implement and you can adopt. So it's all in a structured way, and there's 3 different pieces. One piece is a methodology. So like, let me give you an example. So we talked to you about objection handling today. So we have a whole process for what to say when objections come up. So and how to get around those. So that's part of our methodology. And you can use our methodology. Actually, our methodology is all out in the world of the internet for free. It's on our YouTube channel. So if you go, in fact, there's a whole playlist called Smart Sales System Training Program. So you can, and the nice thing about the playlist is that all the videos are organized into a logical order that you could go from one video to the next. And you can also access our methodology, and we have 6 ebooks that are free, or a physical soft paperback book that you could purchase on Amazon. The thing I like about the paperback book is it's something you could have on your desk and highlight and flag certain chapters. There's a chapter for objections, a chapter for gatekeeper, a chapter for asking questions, and the second piece to what, and the reason why we give away a lot of our training for free is that our business model is to get you to use our software prospecting platform called SalesScripter. And basically, if you like our methodology, the methodology is going to talk to you about building call scripts and call guides and questions to ask and voicemail scripts and email templates. And so if you did not want to spend $1, you could go through and watch all our videos and create all that on your own. And you can do it for free, but you're going to spend some valuable time doing that. So if you love our stuff, you can get all that already created and set up, and you just basically sign up and answer some questions about your products and services, and you get a whole library of documents and CRM and email delivery and email blasts, email automation, and a whole bunch of stuff. And so you get that with our software. So it's like I said, if you love our methodology, you're going to get your money's worth, and it's going to be easier to implement and manage and for yourself or to implement across a team using our software platform. And the third piece is professional services. So certainly we provide consulting and coaching. The pricing for the software is $49 a month. You do get a 40% discount if you sign up for the year, so it's almost half price if you sign up for the year. Our sales training, like I said, you can access it for free on YouTube. You can purchase sales training with us for a group of people, and that's on a case-by-case basis. I do provide a service called a scripter walkthrough, which is a 2-hour coaching engagement that you actually can purchase with me, where I'll go through your sales scripter account with you for $200 and spend, like I said, 2 hours with you and basically help you to create your campaign, answer all the questions, get it all set up, and then you'll have a whole library of scripts. So it's really productive. The software is designed to be self-service. So most of our customers we never talk to. They come in, sign up, get their user account, we never talk to them. But I mean, if you do really want to get the system set up correctly and have a really strong campaign, it is extremely productive for you and I to fill it out and get it set up together, because I'm the person that designed and created the system. I know how it works, and I'm a pretty good wordsmith. I've created a lot of documents and strategies and whatnot. So it's a bargain for basically $249 to get everything that you would get if you did purchase the walkthrough too. I mean, like if you could go in a bookstore and see a book on the shelf that was for your industry and your product, and it was all the documents that you get in Sales Scripter, and it was all just there ready for you to use, and a bunch of other tools in the book, and the book was $250, you would grab it and run out of the store and say keep the change because of the value that you get. Anyways, here's my info. If you want to contact me directly, appreciate you all coming, and let me see if there are any questions.